Here we are, Maceo Paisley, back again, keeping you up to date with the Complexity Saga. Gonna update you on the current state of the project and invite you guys out Thursday and Saturday at 7:30 to engage in some more experimentation. You ready? Here we go! Last time we talked, we're getting ready to do the experiment, which consisted of about a dozen people working in concert, chaotically, asking each other to participate in different transactions that created organization from a complex wall and created simplicity on another wall. I was trying to find out is, do our emotions affect the decision-making process, especially if we're working together in society or in an economy, and if so, how does that affect the decision-making process? To make a long story short, the answer is yes. Emotions like fear, joy, anxiety, calm all come into play in the decision-making process, particularly when other people are involved. They affect our ability to collaborate and compete. This is not necessarily new information, but it's the starting point that I needed to get to. The question is, what happens when we're aware of how our emotions affect our decision-making process? Are we then able to rationally counter the way our emotions affect our decision-making process, make better decisions, collaborate more effectively, work together, build a better society? I'm not entirely sure, but this is what I want to find out. I did a couple things right and a couple things wrong with my experiment. I mapped the way the interactions took place, and I charted some of the emotional information, but it's a little bit muddled, so I need a cleaner data set. This is why I need your help to run the experiment again. This time when I run the experiment, I gotta take better care to keep track of which emotions win out when they come in contact with each other. Is love always the answer, or does fear undermine that love, or does anxiety stifle the whole thing? I have some hints, but I'm not entirely sure what's gonna happen. So now I got to integrate what I talked about yesterday, which was a protosystem. And so protosystem is just looking at the local cultural level of how people interact before there's an institutionalized framework that might nudge them to be more collaborative or competitive. So I want to move that institutionalized information out. Okay, so a protosystem is not a vacuum lab environment, and it's not an uncontrolled wilderness environment. It does have some underlying principles and values like etiquette, manners. It's just unwritten, informal protocol. Culture. Okay, the connection between the complexity work with the post-its and the idea of a protosystem is that both systems iterate themselves. They both create as they're happening. And so I want to look at what exactly influences that and see how we can shape culture by changing our individual actions. My hunch is that every individual has the opportunity to affect culture. So if you leave your protosystem with a little bit of oppression, you drop that into the institutionalized framework, everybody within that framework leaves with a little bit of oppression back into their protosystem, starting the loop all over again. Cool thing is, though, people don't just leave oppression in their environment. They can leave optimism, creativity, or any value set in the protosystem, really. So what I'm looking at is how we appraise culture and even the economy to see what small changes we can leverage to get maximum impact. I'm of the belief that art is the technology of emotion. We're going to have to engage with our emotions in order to co-create the culture that we want to live in. We have to understand that our policy and laws are just a reflection, a formalization of the values that we already had at the protosystemic level. When we talk about fighting systemic injustice, we need to talk about fighting the values that exist within culture that perpetuate that injustice. That means internalized oppression and our emotional disposition that affects our decision-making process, thereby affecting the cultural system and the laws and policies we make. It doesn't mean that we don't have to fight a structural policy fight, but what it does mean is that we need to check in with ourselves at the protosystemic and internal level first, and in the meanwhile, so that we don't carry those negative traits back into institutions that we're trying to clean up. This game I've created, Note to Self, is a group performance art project that I'm also using as a social experiment to see if we can influence culture, increase our net gains at the structural level, so we don't have to fight the same policy fight every 50 years with incremental success.